Dear ladies and gentlemen, I ask you to take your seat. We are all tired, so to say. We have quite intensive work over 2 days, and I am asking you to participate in the last session of the conference. This session will be chaired by Professor Constantin Zuckerman, and it's over to you.
So I welcome the surviving participants, and despite the fact that we are at the end of our proceedings and our forces, we will be served, if I dare to say, le plat de résistance. We will be served the heavy dish, which consists in two communications on actually the main reference, the main source on the Lithuanian among the Byzantine literature, the text of Gregoras. And I invite first Professor Sergejus Temčinas, professor at the University of Athens, who came all the way to faraway Vilnius to speak about this source.
Dear colleagues, here at our conference, I rather represent the Lithuanian Institute of History as indicated here in our program. But now I don't feel quite comfortable today, since I mostly deal with medieval Slavic texts written in Old Church Slavonic or in Ruthenian. But today I would like to present you some results of my modest research done on Byzantine text, in spite of the fact that I am not at all a specialist in Byzantine studies. But I hope that at least some of this material I'm going to present to you might be of some interest to all of us. So the title of my paper is the Grand Duke Algirdas Theological Letter to the Patriarch of Constantinople in NIKEPHOROS Gregoras History, Source Research and authorship of the text. So the text I would like to comment on is a part of the book number 36 in Gregoras' Byzantine History. And this specific fragment was first commented by Valentin Perisot, who published the Greek text of this, allegedly theological letter in 1851. It means several years earlier than the integral text of Gregoras' history was published. So I mean the last several books of this history. At this time, the original Greek text was available along with a translation into French, and Professor Perisot commented this part of Gregoras' chronicle history, and concluded that if the text of Algirdas' letter is authentic, it must have been written by a Greek or Ruthenian churchman, and this could be a logical conclusion, since, as we know for sure, the text contains some quotations from the New Testament. In Lithuania, this specific text was reproduced once more. It was translated into Lithuanian and published several years ago in a book devoted to the Grand Duke Algirdas. The text was translated from Greek by Tatiana Aleknenia, who noticed in her brief introduction to the text that Algirdas knew several languages, and he could have asked his Orthodox Church person to put his Algirdas' own ideas in a theological and philosophical manner. So, and we can assume that this churchman could be either a Greek or Ruthenian monk or priest. Now we are faced with two different possibilities. Since the text might be authentic, and in this case, Gregoras had an access to a real historical letter and reproduced it faithfully in his history. Another possibility is that the text is not authentic, but if so, it might be one of three different situations here. The first one is that the text could be a secondary Greek translation made from authentic document originally written in a different language. In this case, the document is not authentic in its linguistic form, but the text might be quite authentic. Another possibility is that the text is not authentic neither in its linguistic form nor in its text, but it could be a secondary Byzantine renarration of an original document whose text remains unknown to us. And the third possibility is that the Greek text of Gregoras is a pure fiction with no historical grounds at all. So now we are in a position to tell something more about this relatively small portion of Gregoras' history, since we have access to two different, relatively new translations of the entire text into different languages. I mean, the well-known German translation and the translation into Russian, produced quite recently by a translator, Roman Yashunsky, who had consulted the previous German translations, and he indicated in his notes to the text some sources used in the alleged Algirdas theological letter. So now what can be said about this particular text? My first remark is that in spite of the naming of this fragment, which is named a theological letter, in the history it is presented as an oral speech, because it starts with, and then Algirdas said, and after the text concludes, we have, well, a different but quite similar in meaning reference to this specific text. Another thing is that the Russian translation indicates at least two references to ancient Greek text of pagan origin, one being an allusion to Aeschylus' Prometheus Vinctus, and another one being a short quotation, just 4 words, from Pindarus' Olympia, and namely its 6th ode. And this changes the situation dramatically, since, as we know from historical sources, there were 2 different kinds of Byzantine education. One being an ecclesiastical in nature, when monks and ordinary priests would learn by heart the Psalter. They certainly knew quite well the New Testament, and it's not a surprise for us that text may contain some quotations from this sort of texts. But another kind of Byzantine education was based on pagan ancient texts, pre-Christians by their origin, and we don't see this educational background quite often among church figures. And if we do see exactly this kind of education, it is almost exclusively deals with people of the highest rank of the ecclesiastic hierarchy, namely patriarchs and bishops, who could enter the ecclesiastical structure from laity and ordained patriarchs and bishops, while having secular background and secular type of education. And if it turns true that the text contains some allusions or even quotations from ancient pagan sources, then we should exclude the possibility the text could be written by a monk or priest, since it was not quite common for the lowest levels of the church hierarchy to possess this high-level education of secular type. And then we should exclude for sure that Slavic person could write this type of text, since we don't see normal traces of the high-level education based on pagan Greek sources in the Slavonic tradition, be it South Slavonic or East Slavonic. And I would like to refer to the brilliant paper made by Professor Mitsiu here. So if we have Greek texts written in Slavia Orientalis, then the language of this text, and not of very high level, it's very close to the spoken Greek tradition. And the same type of language we can see even in texts written in Constantinople and elsewhere in Byzantine when they were addressed to people from the East Slavic territories. And now I would like to add some more quotations from the ancient Greek tradition, and this is a quotation from the third Olympiac speech by Demosthenes. You can see it, the Greek text here, and also on your handouts, and it says, "Phrasato tis emi parelson posen allosen," and the text continues. You can read it. So this fragment is not quite concrete and just a rhetorical device which could be translated as let someone step out and tell me that I'm mistaken and prove that my words are not truth. So the speeches written by Demosthenes were well known in the Greek tradition. Dionysius of Halicarnassus wrote a treatise devoted specifically to the rhetorical texts by Demosthenes, compared his rhetorical skills to that of other Greek rhetors, and concluded that Demosthenes surpasses all other ancient Greek rhetors and could be thought as the best rhetor of all times. And exactly the same phrase could be seen in a text which belongs to Sopater, the rhetor, in his text, "There is Zitimaton." And also we see exactly the same fragment in Gregoras' history, put in as a speech allegedly said by Algirdas. So we have here 5 different meaningful words in the same put in the same order, and each of them is in exactly the same grammatical form. So it cannot be just a coincidence, and we should treat this example as quotation. But we can see quite similar phrases in other places of Gregoras' history, and I give you 5 instances here. But, and we will comment this fact later, that in all other instances, the quotation is shorter than that put it in the mouth of Algirdas. We see just phrasato tis emi parelson without the continuation posen allosen. It is a significant fact, since if we treat the text as an original historical document, then we should state that Algirdas must have known Demosthenes' speeches even better than other people quoted in Gregoras' chronicle, who were unable to produce more than 3 meaningful words in a sequence, while Algirdas himself could quote it in a more extensive form, using not 3 but 5 words exactly from the third Olympiac speech by Demosthenes. But it is quite interesting that we have a similar phrase put in a different form, which is not exactly the same quotation from Demosthenes, and it says legeto mitis parelson instead of phrasato mitis parelson. And we have another 8 examples in the same Gregoras history. And you can see the context here and also on your handout. So, and we have 2 similar forms which are unique as far as I know, which have the same meaning, general meaning, but put in a different way. It's elencheto tis parelson and fei tis parelson. So if we put all these instances in a summary table, we will see that we have 6 different instances of the phrase phrasato mitis parelson, and you can see the exact places where this specific form is used in Gregoras' history, and 8 instances of similar but not quite precise quotations from Demosthenes, legeto mitis parelson, and 2 unique forms. And if we compare the 2 columns here, we will see that the distribution of these forms is not a coincidence, since if we have 8 instances of legeto mitis parelson, but there are only 2 persons associated with this kind of verbal expression. So it is NIKEPHOROS Gregoras himself, and as we know, he quotes himself and reproduces his own speeches quite extensively throughout his history. And there is only 1 person who uses the same form twice, and this is Yuriy Asanina. So 8 occurrences and just 2 people associated with this form. But the alternative form, phrasato mitis parelson, can be seen 6 times through the chronicle. We have, well, a different set of historical figures associated with this type of expression. So, and we will immediately see that these are the Byzantine emperors or officials and historical figures of the highest rank, like Alexios Apokavkos. And the only exception from this rule is a disciple of Gregory Palamas, who uses the same phrase, phrasato metis parelthon, which coincides exactly with the frames first used by Demosthenes in his Olympiac speeches. So we, in total, we have 8 and 14 instances with a clear distribution between these two phrases, which mean, in fact, the same things, but the difference is stylistic. So only the rulers and the highest functionaries, the highest figures, quote the third Olympiac speech by Demosthenes exactly, and we have another a little bit lower rank of people who use a different form with legato metis parelthon, including Gregoras himself and Yuriy Asanina. So, and we would keep in mind that in this context, Algirdas seems to be the only person to have known Demosthenes' speeches even better than the Byzantine emperors and other figures associated with this kind of wording. So I think that, yes, it's quite a small portion of rhetorical devices used by NIKEPHOROS Gregoras in his history, but I think it is enough for us to conclude that the text in its linguistic form is not authentic at all, since we cannot believe Algirdas to have known better the speeches by Demosthenes than everyone else in Byzantium first. And then it is not a faithful Byzantine translation of a real document originally written in other languages, since this phrase deals not only with pure linguistic expression of the text, but only of rhetorical devices. And we cannot think of Byzantine people to change not just the linguistic form of original document while translating it into Greek, but put additional rhetorical devices to the original text. So it is not very plausible. So the only conclusion I can make from all this is that we are left with the only possibility to conclude that this specific text put as an oral speech allegedly said by Algirdas to the Patriarch of Constantinople was written by Gregoras himself, and that's why we see more instances of the same rhetorical devices through his text. We could only guess that the text might have been renarrated of original document, but its text in this case remains totally unknown to us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Sergejus, for this a very interesting presentation. Since the talk was short, I suggest that we ask the questions now and then go to the next communication. So please, what are your questions, observations on the topic raised? Yes, Janina. Please, Janina, you raise. Okay, I forgot that.
First of all, thank you for a really interesting and I would say thought-provoking talk. And I have a question. When you claim that it's not probably a talk by Algirdas himself, but rather a construct created by a narrator, right? So I was thinking that when it comes to intertextuality used in discourse, you know, the reference to one's ideas, wouldn't you consider it as an attempt to represent Algirdas, if we assume that he could really say so, an attempt to input his talk in a way that it was typical of the creator's surrounding? So not as an evidence that if he knows better the constructs used, but rather an attempt to unify the methods of speaking. I mean, I'm quite, I'm not a specialist in the field, but I was just curious. So is it a possible way?
Yeah, well, we should separate possibilities from the facts. So we can imagine the text has been renarrated and some additional rhetorical devices introduced to it, but it's a pure guess. We cannot prove it at all. So it's not a real fact. So if we wish, we could think this way, but we cannot present any proofs of being exactly that we're dealing exactly with this situation. So it's not a scholarly question, but it's more a question of our willingness to read our own inclinations inside the particular text, and I would like to avoid this possibility myself. And if you prefer, so you can do this. Yeah.
Thank you for this question. Other question, please. Questions, observations?
Perhaps I may ask, because I remember that Ihor Shevchenko was also skeptical about the idea that, so to say, this theological letter could be written by Algirdas or by people from his surrounding, and he quasi-jokingly remarked that Algirdas was made to retell things from quite different cultural spheres, and one of his sphere, I think, that was the Holy Writ. So to say, did you find any evidence that this text contains not only Demosthenes and high-flown rhetoric, but also something taken from the Gospels, taken from the Holy Scripture?
Yeah, these quotations are very well known, and they're indicated in every translation we have now, and these quotations are also mentioned in the Lithuanian translation of this theological letter. But I would like to stress once again that the only person who could introduce this stylistical difference between the two groups of people which express their own thoughts in close but different rhetorical manner was the only person, it was Gregoras himself. That's why we can see the same devices put in mouth of different historical figures.
Katerina, please.
Thank you so much. This is really brilliant. I have a question because you argue that probably Gregoras has written this. Actually, it's a construction of him. What do you think was his motive to include this type of theological letter in his history?
Well, it's very difficult to say something substantial about his possible intentions. So, because they remain unknown to us. But when I read the text and see quite long speeches of different historical persons, several pages each in Gregoras' history, so it reminds me of a historical Roman, as a text normally written by modern writers as a fiction more than historical documents, since otherwise we should think that Gregoras himself or other person would produce a stenography of each speech, and it could be able to trace all these texts he puts into the mouth of different historical figures. So I don't think it's a realistic assumption.
Yeah, and just thinking perhaps it's like a Kaiser critique or a kind of, to present a different type of rulership, or it has a connection also to the letter to Philotheos Kokkinos, which probably dated about the same time, and I cannot avoid thinking that it's like a mocking way. It's a way to mock the church establishment in a way, or to bring another example, another exemplum for from outside, in order to in all this framework of his work to fight against Palamas, and the Philotheos Kokkinos was a Palamite. Perhaps, I don't know, just a thought, perhaps not really sustainable, but it could be put in this framework of his way to criticize, actually, indirectly, or through this piece of text, the current situation. And perhaps he had knowledge that there is a letter of Algirdas that came to the Patriarchate, because he had people visiting him in prison. So I cannot exclude the possibility that he got knowledge of the existence of this communication, and he just, perhaps, why not, put his own interpretation in the whole thing of the letter exchange between Lithuania and... But this is really, I don't know if we can accept this interpretation, but it could have been a way to explain the whole text.
You're absolutely right. We cannot exclude a possibility that a real letter existed, but its text, if so, remains totally unknown to us. And this is just our guess that these documents really existed. We have no proof of this. It's just a matter of our belief more than scholar fact.
If there are no other questions, okay, Oleksandr.
Just because of my total ignorance in this topic, thank you for this excellent talk. So my question is why NIKEPHOROS Gregoras, why he choose Algirdas as an author of this letter, which you prove was, to say, fabricated. So, because Algirdas was the only pagan ruler in Europe at that time, because Algirdas was pagan ruler over Orthodox Christians, so to present Algirdas as a smart pagan asking questions to Patriarch and so on. What is your explanation? So why Algirdas? Yes. Why not some other?
My own explanation is that he used exactly this phrase, phrasato metis paralthon, only with association of rulers of the highest rank. That's why Algirdas fits this pattern quite well, in spite of the fact of his pagan background. And I doubt that the author himself could do a similar confrontation of these small rhetorical devices in order to see whether Algirdas or other person quotes Demosthenes more extensively than the rest of the historical figures in the same text, since we have 36 books, so it's an impressive text, and I don't believe the author himself could memorize, well, every word he wrote everywhere in his history. It seems absolutely unbelievable to me.
But precisely, if I may rejoin on what you just said, it's still striking that in the entire collection of quotations that you have presented, the 16 of them, only one, which is attributed to Algirdas, shows the full awareness of the source. This, at least theoretically, if I play the devil's advocate, this allows to construct a different sequence that actually it's not Gregoras, despite all our respect for his knowledge. It's not Gregoras who read the Demosthenes, or at least the Dionysius of Halicarnassus, but whoever wrote this letter for Algirdas, and afterwards Gregoras used it in incomplete form. You see, it's striking that 15 usages out of 16 are incomplete, while normally an author who wants to boast a classical quotation gives it as full as he can. What would be the objection to this opposite transmission?
Yes, okay, I tried to comment on this in my presentation. I will try to put it in another way. If so, we should look for a Byzantine person, not a Slavic ecclesiastic figure in Algirdas' cycles, first of all. And this person should be of the highest ecclesiastic rank. I think patriarch or bishop, but not lower clergy. So I don't see any historical figure. If we want to remain realistic, we cannot conclude something else except of this. If we find a Byzantine patriarch or bishop close to Algirdas himself, and then we should evaluate if this theoretical possibilities is plausible or not.
So there is a question from Canada, you say?
Canada.
Yeah.
There is a question from Canada. Rasama Jeka is online, so to say welcome.
Oh, okay. Welcome, please ask your question.
Negirdime jūsų.
We cannot hear you.
Garsą įjunkite.
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Although I don't know if I should thank you for taking away another of these very rare primary sources from our Lithuanian. But I want to ask, are you aware of the work of John Meyendorff? His book, Byzantium and the Rise of Russia. He was very well known scholar of Byzantine texts, of Byzantine theology. And when he wrote about this letter, he felt that it had quite bad Greek. He felt that that's why he thought it was written by someone in Algirdas' court. He thought it was written it certainly has some very blunt phrases. He thought it was written in poor Greek. What is your reaction to that? And also in terms of high churchmen, have you considered Cyprian, who later becomes metropolitan, who had good relations with Algirdas?
So thank you very much, but could you please be more specific and give some examples of the bad Greek in this part of Gregoras history?
It seems to me
unfortunately,
Dear Rasa, I would like to cut to the chase, because I think that you have in mind that letter of Algirdas that was produced in 3070. So to say.
So do you mean the Pitakion or part of
So
Gregoras?
it is quite another text, and it is the most recent discovery, so to say, of Lithuanian philologists who invented, so to say, this letter and attributed it to Algirdas. And Mendorf was referring to that letter that was written and sent out to Constantinople in 1371.
Yeah, it's
yes.
It's a different text,
which goes by in Lithuania as a theological letter of Algirdas.
Yeah,
it's quite another. We are dealing with quite another excerpt of from the chronicle. From the Byzantine history of Gregoras NIKEPHOROS.
Oh, I see. I apologize.
Thank you.
Yeah, not having
no problem,
the screen properly. Yes.
Thank you very much for your lecture and your answers. And we will continue with Nicephorus Gregoras. And with a talk by Oleksandr Fylypchuk, currently a postdoctoral fellow at the German Institute of Paris, entitled The Northern World of NIKEPHOROS Gregoras, Heidelberg Palatinus Graecus 129, and Materials for the History. Please, Alexander.
Many thanks for introduction. I hope you can hear me well. And unlike Professor Temčinas' case studies dedicated to letter of Algirdas, I present my preliminary only observation dedicated to famous figure late Byzantine historiography. The history of the Roman by Nikephoros Gregoras represent significant sources for the study of Byzantine Russian and Byzantine-Lithuanian relation during the late 13th and mid-14th century. In contrast to tangible evidence, history of Gregoras is valuable sources for studying the Byzantine reception of post-Mongol Rus, imagery and mental geography on Byzantine historian. At the same time, the history of Gregoras is one of the most comprehensive Byzantine historical narratives. Therefore, his work in detail classicizing history in 37 books would began after collapse Constantinople and in 1558 or 59. The first 7 books drawing from the works Acropolis and Pachymeres. It would appear that Gregoras then preceded and envisaged his work a direct and detailed continuation of Pachymer history. His text incorporates a substantial number of digressions on Eschat's controversy and synod of 1351, in which Gregoras opposite the Eschat's theologian Gregory Palamat. Books 30-35 deals primarily with Gregoras' theological stance. Unlike most work of Byzantine historiography, Gregoras included extensive discussion of astronomy and geography. This fascination with astrology and geography, as we shall see, had some impact on the content and composition of his Rus-Lithuanian narrative. The date of composition of Gregoras' history are matter of discussion. One Dieter has suggested it was written between 1330 and 1350, contemporaneously with many of the later events described in the narrative. This broad dating is certainly reasonable, but now needs to be clarified, since the history was written and circulated in Constantinople in several installments since 1340. History is preserved today. It's more than 40 manuscripts, 5 of which date to 14th century. 2 of them, namely of Vaticanus Grecus 164 and 65, partially copied, annotated, and revised by Gregoras himself. Also, Gregoras seems to have worked on his text for a long time. History was left unfinished at the author date. Since the 2 manuscripts of history mentioned about Gregoras' autograph, it's possible to trace when and how Gregoras planned the structure of his work. The title preceding the Pinax to Vaticanus 165, written by Gregoras in black ink on the top of folio 1, for instance, indicated that the volume contained 11 discourse or book of the history. Did Gregoras originally plan only 11 books of his history? Did he later change his plan and create a new version of his works? Yes, later the Pinax entry on folio 6 point to the beginning the first discourse from second book of Gregoras' history, and further specifies that his would be the beginning of the 12 discourse. Should we consider the work as a whole? Nonetheless, the title of the beginning of book 12 further corroborates the impression of multi-volume edition, the 2 Vatican Codis, conceived and important, that however do not contain the entire book 12. Vaticanus Grecus 64 opens with the beginning the book 12 and folio 10. It picks out from where Vaticanus 65 had left. Finally, the Pinax entry at the folio 1 of Vaticanus Codex 64, indicating the beginning of book 12, also introduced the first discourse in the volume as 12 in the context of entire work. This structural difference seems to reflect the process of Gregoras' work on his text. Like other Byzantine historians such as Nikita Choniates, he kept revising his text and adding new books, especially those dealing with Rus-Lithuanian affair. However, unlike Choniat and other Byzantine historians, the case of Gregoras is unique in that Gregoras materials and library have come down to us. We therefore have excellent opportunity to analyze the influence these materials and the library on the formation of the text of history and individual themes, including his message about the Northern Border. Before moving on the composition of his library, it's worth defining the methodological question, namely, how and what exactly is to be understood by Gregoras' library. On the one hand, the library is traditionally often understood as a reading cycle or list of what the author has read or collected. On the other hand, the library is a manuscript that belongs to the author. In the case of Gregoras, it is possible to follow both first and second paths. In my opinion, however, the later is most optimal, since we have a large number of Gregoras autographs, which are in fact is excellent marker for the direct composition of his library. In other words, only the autograph and marginalia left by Grigora reliable arguments for determining his right reading circle and material he collected and the composition of his 5 manuscripts that contain Grigora autograph to varying degree. Some of them came from collection of Hora monastery in Constantinople and were once collected by Theodore Metochides. Theodore Metochides himself appreciates the richness of this library, which after his exile came under the supervision of Grigora. Finally, Metochides described it. You can hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. It's a bad connection of mine. Finally, Metochides described its library in his Logos to Gregoras. Therefore, you also receive this product of my wisdom as a calm harbor, and receive the many other books that I have collected here. As sacred as the wisdom of Greece, the reconstruction of entire collection of books kept by Hora is still a very urgent task and so far from being achieved. Therefore, the Gregoras library should not be understood as the entire library of Hora, but only as a collection of manuscripts that passed through his hand and preserve Gregoras' footprints. Gregoras' library includes manuscripts that he arranged, rewrote, or supervised, copied and supervises the copying, all the manuscripts that he reread and added his own title, correction, marginalia, notes, and even restored. Traditionally, researchers have been interested in the part Gregorius' library devoted to astronomy and geography. Of the 45 manuscripts in the library, 11 astronomical manuscripts. As Daniel Banconi has recently pointed out, Gregoras' intervention often consists of adding title and some calculation to this astronomical treatise. It is noteworthy that Gregoras' work on the Codices Marcianus Parisian took place in 1331, when Grigora was also actively working on the books of history. His obsession with astronomy and astrology, which is fully reflected in his Rus-Lithuanian narrative, where he repeatedly used terms typical for genre astronomical treatise. For example, the word sun appeared repeatedly in Algirdas' famous description. In book 36, Grigora invents a speech of Algirdas, aforementioned Professor Temčinas, which the sun is mentioned 7 times. Of course, Gregoras contrasts Byzantine corruption and evil deed in this imaginary speech of Algirdas with harmony of law and justice that occur in case of Algirdas. He constructed for the Rus-Lithuanian excourse fully reflect in the richness of Gregoras' vocabulary based on his active study of astronomy. His interest in geography was not less important. Among Gregoras' autographs, there are 6 manuscripts in which he added a number of marginalia to works or fragments of works by Ptolemy. It should be acknowledged that some Gregoras' geographic vision will be compiled in special notebook, which will be discussed later. This vision also includes the addition of marginalia to text of Herodotus from manuscript Laurentian. Obviously, Gregoras repeatedly uses this manuscript to write separate narrative on geography of Rus. Paradoxically, however, Gregoras' idea of geography of Rus, described in the book 28 and 36, is entirely based on this extract. Also, it's obvious that Gregoras, who had access to one of the best library of his time, could have learned more about the geography of the North. Nevertheless, it seems to his approach to describing the geography of Rus and Lithuania was precisely to return to classical geographic traditions, the old name in the old mental geography. While Schur have primary focusing on mathematics, harmonic theory, astronomy, and philosophy in reconstruction Gregoras' library, the manuscript of Gregora, which contain historical work, have been studied rarely. It's evidence that this historical text collected by Gregora served not only for the pleasure of reading them, but also shaped Gregora's understanding on his own history. Given that Gregoras was assembling his historical library before and during the composition of his history, it's evident that his selections were intended for a purely practical purpose. In particular, approximately 10 of his manuscripts represent the transmission of ancient Greek history. This evidence suggests that Gregoras read Diodor of Sicily extensively, as evidences by extensive marginalia, but Gregoras always these texts in four manuscript of selected form his author. Concurrently, Gregoras displayed a clear fascination of the Roman history Dion Cassius, which in his view provides a conceptual framework for his own text. It is notable that Gregora did not limit himself for merely reading this text. He also attempted to locate the lost section of Dion Cassius' work. In particular, 3 manuscripts from his collection indicate that Gregoras was not a possession for Dion Cassius' Roman history entirely, but is a shortened version of compiled by John Xiphilin. Furthermore, he from text Zonara or abridged version of Dion Cassius of Zonara, which extensively utilizes the first 21 books of Roman history. In fact, Gregoras collected several manuscripts and abridged version of Dion Cassius compiled by John Xiphilin, and tried to identify other fragments of author work. For example, Marcianus' Codex was probably annotated by Gregoras at the Chora Monastery, where he was in charge of the library after the restoration of monastic facility in 1321. It's significance important to note that the arrangement of these fragments by Dion Cassius in Marcianus' Codex, as recently established by Inman Collada Perez Martin, occur at the end of Gregoras' life. Conversely, it appears that this collection of aforementioned manuscript occurred at the very beginning of his work on the history. This corroborated by Grigora words about Dion Cassius as a model for his own text, as well as by preparatory material for history found in the Codex Heidelberg. The history of the study of Heidelberg Codex is replete with erroneous interpretation and conclusion. For a considerable period of time, the excerpts included in this codex were erroneously attributed to Planut. However, it's clear that Planut died around 30 years before creating this collection. It's evident that the work on the excerpts was conducted a later day, particularly in the relation to the Scythian oration or narrative by Theodore Metochites. In this regard, Arthur Biddle has already identified this excerpt as material by NIKEPHOROS Gregoras. Also, the researcher only briefly noticed the connection between this material and history of Nicephorus Gregoras. His idea was subsequently corroborated. For example, Igor Shevchenko in famous paper observed that the excerpts were employed by Gregoras in 7 books on his history as evidenced by report on the title of Russian prince. Furthermore, Shevchenko, in accordance with the Biddle finding, highlighted that the excerpts had been rewritten by the hand of Nicephorus Gregoras, thereby establishing them as one of his numerous autographs. It's acknowledged that it was first identified by Max Stroh in 1888, who was the first to accurate the line to extend Gregoras' contribution to this excerpt. How should we interpret Gregoras' writing of this excerpt? His work on them occupies a significant number of manuscript pages and included extract not only from the work of his contemporaries, but also from Dion Cassius' history. One might inquire whether this notebook of Gregoras constituted a parallel work to his history. Alternatively, they could be regarded preliminary material for the history. In other words, the excerptor have identified not only Gregoras' changing interest while writing the history, but also the range of sources that he used or could be used in book of history. Before examining the limitation of this approach in the history, it is beneficial to delineate more precisely the role of this excerpt in Gregoras' library. His utilization of the past and processing of historical works has been comparatively understudied. In this instance, excerpt from the Heidelberg Codex represents the range of options available to Gregoras, namely the reconstruction of the historical section of his library. It's crucial to acknowledge that Gregoras had numerous opportunities to procure manuscripts of diverse types. After the restoration of Chora monastery, the library of this Constantinople monastery posted to a considerable number of manuscripts, but the presence in them in the hand of Gregoras is a powerful argument in favor of this localization, particularly if the notes reflect his activity as curator of library. For example, the Scythian narrative of Metochite was copied by Gregoras for his excerpt following the acquisition or manuscript or part of this collection from Chora monastery. In addition, Gregoras was another reader of Xiphilion Epitome as folio 31 of his notebook of Heidelberg Codex proves. In fact, he made 2 selections of Xiphilion Epitome, the first one short on folio 31 and second one of 5 pages on last folio on this codex. However, it's necessary to look directly at Gregoras' works on this excerpta from Codex Heidelberg, out of collection of texts by more than 60 authors. Historical part included extract from 16 authors mentioned, Xiphilinus, Epitome, and other. However, the number of extract of Xiphilinus Epitome is much larger than Max Stroh had previously assumed. As already noted, Gregoras extracted from this text on folio 31, but separate entry can be traced on folio 93 and even folio 37, as will be discussed below. Along with this, Gregoras make extensive extract from Arian, Diodorus, Joseph Flavius, and other also historical works he read in preparation for his history. It is noteworthy that among the Byzantine historical texts, Nicephorus make extract from Procopius, Theophan, and Psellos, too, while the extract from Psellos is quite short and also deal with Roman history. Nikephoros were more interested in the text Procopius, despite the fact that Nicephorus paid great attention to geography. His knowledge of geography of the north was generally based on extract from Herodotus, was Scythian narrative. He carefully transcribed it on folio 34, 36. He works on the Scythian oration of Metochites, looked somewhat different. In particular, in this text, the Scythian excursus is divided into several parts. The first part is presented on folio 125, while the second part is placed at the middle of codex. In addition, Gregoras wrote out some fragment from the so-called Mescalenia Metochite on folio 125. He seems to have placed a fragment from Metochite on several leaves, including folio 37. In compiling this notebook, Gregoras might have returned to his favorite text several times. It does not appear that his work on his notebook took very long. It's important to note that among all Gregoras except in this manuscript, only Metochite text can serve as a date in future. Given that the Metochite obviously did not write this Scythian oration in his other short text in the last 2 years of his life, it's likely that the work on the excerpt was completed around 1332-33, because unlike his library, Gregoras stopped filling this codex after the first books of his history were written. There can therefore be no doubt that the codex represents Gregoras' early view. In the light of this somewhat chaotic extract from such different authors, can we trace any connection to the preparation of actual writing of the history? The idea of excerpta on the one hand was to systematize what Gregoras had read. On the other hand, some of these materials could have been used directly as outlines for the future history, or were already being used in the process of writing it. Let's try to identify some this case of connection between excerpta and the history. In his chaotic narrative of Rus and Lithuania, Gregoras repeatedly returned to the geography of Rus. His discussion of the geography of Rus does not stop even after he has described the geography of the north. On the one hand, this duplication can be explained by the growth of his history and Grigora attempt to explain the realities, religions, politics in the middle 14th century. On the other hand, the first geographical fragment on the Rus show borrowing or a reading was Herodotus, was excerpt stop folio 66 of the codex, and above all Metohid Scythian description. If its first fragment shows the traditional geography of North according to Herodotus, between Gregoras wrote that between those mountains of the far north from which the Tana is the greatest of the river spring, as well as the greatest smaller river, which flow down as discharge into the Meotian and Caspian seas. Instead, the second fragment in the book suggests the use of Metohid Scythian excurse. This wall people of the Rus are most populous from ancient time, have been distributed in many different places, having arrived and been divided in some 3 or 4 realms and authorities. But when the proclamation of the fire of God late came there, most regions sized it filling themselves with wood seals for grace, receiving holy baptisms without trouble. Late, Gregoras returned to the topic of region of paganites and writes that the prince and his people worship the sun, extremely warlike, and live in secure place near the border with Celt and Gaul, who live by the northern ocean and island of Thule. Like Metohid, Gregoras mentions the number of Yuriy, but his idea of geography of Lithuania is also based on the work Ptolemy, which he actively copied in the number of codices in his library. This may explain why Grigora erroneously located this area near Celt and Gaul, living by the Northern Ocean, and consider it to be one of the principality of Rus instead of the separate political entity. Finally, Gregoras noted that the 3 of the ruler, hegemon of all Rus, together with their subject, have the some Orthodox faith united with us, but therefore one not is the least. It is notable that this fragment, Gregoras evidently considered Lithuania to be part of Rus. As a notable man of Lithuanian interest, Gregoras here develops the tradition of some patriarchal documents favorable to Lithuania. However, it should be acknowledged that this identification of Lithuania with Rus was not as clear in history of Grigora or Grigora geography. In book 36, Gregoras states that the Kievan metropolis is situated in close proximity to the territory of a ruler who is a subject of Lithuanian people. These people numerous and warlike. It's noteworthy that Gregoras employs the term crowded people to describe the Lithuanian in this context, term that is also used in his work on Rus in general. For example, Gregoras makes several references to number of Rus in his history. At the author he notes that the country of Rus is crowded and adds extremely crowded. This clarification appears to pertain the territory under Moscow control, as evidenced by Gregoras' final remarks, in which he characterizes the Lithuanian or Rus-Lithuanian land as rather crowded, polyanthropotaton people. This concept also emerges in Patriarch documents. The term polyanthropon ethnos is frequently employed in these documents to signify the Rus-Lithuanian lands as the charge of polyanthropos ethnos. This first occurs in the chart of Patriarch Philotheos Hopinus in 1353, where this definition of Rus became increasingly prevalent. However, as the case of Gregoras demonstrated, it's unlikely this definition can be considered to be exclusively applicable to Rus-Lithuanian land. Furthermore, Gregoras employs the expression plesiochoros to indicate the proximity between Kiev and Lithuania, thereby demonstrating his understanding of the geography of the north. An example of this connection between Excerpta and history allow us to look into a workshop of the Byzantine historian and understand how certain Gregoras' ideas about the northern world were formed. In particular, in both Excerpta and the history, Gregoras described the title for a Rus prince. Igor Shevchenko, in famous paper, examined this message and correctly identified it as the work of Gregoras. There is need to reread this direct connection between Excerpt and the history. Gregoras invent a title for a Russian prince, Epites Trapezes. As can be seen, he placed his report on the title of ruler of Rus on folio 37, immediately after the end of his excerpt from Herodotus. Among the people conquered by the Roman and the ruler, Augustus honored some of them with various honors, showing that they were completely subordinated to him, and he gave them appropriate honor. He gave the title of Epites Trapezes to ruler of Russia. When the ambassador from the Rus came to Andronicus Palaiologos, he brought greeting with the word "my ruler," the king of the Rus, and Epites Trapezes, your sacred majesty, both humbly before your sacred majesty. The same story he invented about the ancient root of the title of Rus prince, presented in his history very similar to Excerpta, but with certain correction. For example, the Augustus of Excerpta has been transformed to Constantin the Great in Gregoras' history, whereas Excerpta Gregoras gives the title of Great Primikyrios to Duke Atsasen, history give it to ruler of Boeotia and Thebes. In the next fragment, the history gives us some title to ruler of Athens and Thebes, deplores some deformation. Surprisingly, in his Excerpta, Gregoras referred to a specific event in which the title of Russian prince was presented. Instead, in the history, the title is only mentioned in the context of general theory of title without any reference to any case. The Rosicos ruler was appointed to the position and honor of Epites Trapezes by Constantin the Great. In creating such a long past for the title of the Russian ruler, which reached far back as the time of Augustus in Excerpta, or Constantin the Great as in history, Gregoras used primarily those texts from which extract present in excerpta. Analyzing Gregoras' words about the origin of the title of Rus Prince in excerpta, we see that he used extract from Xiphilinus' epitome to extend this story. In general, Xiphilinus' epitome is used by him very extensively for 7 books of his history. Thus, the case of the history of the title of Rus Prince seems illustrated here. First, Gregoras placed his reflection on the origin of the title of in the excerpta, and from there he later transferred it to his history. However, some time must have passed between this action. Since the excerpta were written before the 31-32, the fragment about the title of Rus Prince directly mention Andronicus Paleologus. It's very likely that the motive for writing this short narrative about the title of the Rus Prince was event during back to early time. Whether a mere invention by Gregoras, as Shevchenko has suggested. On the one hand, Gregoras does indeed invent a long, fanciful story about the origin of the title. On the other hand, the fantasy origin story could only be his attempt to explain the existence of this title for a Rus prince at the time of Andronicus Paleologus. At the same time, Igor Shevchenko assumed that Gregoras did not understand this story and confused the Rus word for throne, prestol. According to Shevchenko, prestol at the throne could have been heard as prestol at the table, and then mistranslated as epites trapezes, one who served at the table. Following Shevchenko suggested Gregoras' words should be therefore have read as my master, King of Rus, at the throne of your Holy Majesty, prostrated himself obsequiously before your Holy Majesty. For all the wit Shevchenko conjecture, however, this explanation does not seem entirely satisfactory. In the first place, Gregoras did not know Slavonic, so
Alexander, can you hear me? It's time to advance to the conclusions. How much time do you need?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, perfect.
On the other hand, the idea that ambassador of a Russian ruler would speak Slavonic rather than Greek at the meeting with Andronic Paleologus is not plausible. It does not seem that the title of a Russian prince is a complete fiction, causing Gregoras a misperception. It's significant that Gregoras believed in the reality of this title, since he included this fragment in abbreviated form in his history. Taking into account the dating of this extract, the story of this reception of the Rus ambassador mentioned by Gregoras seems to lead us to the time before creating Heidelberg Codex. Traditionally, this ruler of Rus, who called himself Epites Trapezes, was considered to be a prince of Moscow and even Tver. However, many political and dynastic factors led us to Galich and last Romanovich family. The unconventional terminology employed by Gregoras in his writing is indicative of ruler Galicia-Volhynia. He used the term Basileus for him, which he did not use for ruler of Rus. Like the Patriarch document, Gregoras employed Rex traditional archon. The example, this document demonstrates that this process had several gradations. The same can be said of NIKEPHOROS Gregoras. Does not he use the term Basileus constitute a royal title of ruler rule Galician Volhynia in history. It's also worth considering another example of connection between excerpta and the history. In the book 36, Gregoras describes the arrival of Theognost in Rus. He also provides a brief history of Kievan metropolis. Gregoras states the second temple called Kiev was long ago chosen by people the Rus as a metropolis. As a result of recent attack by Northern Scythians, the temple or Kiev became a Scythian desert. Gregoras states that after this event, Kiev could no longer be a worthy throne and see of the bishop of all Rus. It's crucial to acknowledge that when employing the term Scythian desert, Gregoras drew from oration of Aelius Aristide. It became evident that he placed a fragment from this oration in folio 36, 37, and 39 and 40 in Heidelberg Codex. Gregoras employs the word of Aristide, which he had previously written down in his narrative about the title for the ruler of the Rus. He also used this word to write this fragment about the past of Kievan metropolis. Consequently, on the folio 37, which contains his notation of the title and rewriting word of Aelius Aristide with the mention of Scythian desert, was valuable sources for his subsequent narrative. In referring to Kiev region as a Scythian desert, Gregoras alluded to a recent attack by Northern Scythia. Given that book is okay, given last line. Furthermore, Grigora, unaware of the specify of this charge, referred is to Kiev, thereby conflating the charge and city. Grigora explained this returning to the Rus-Lithuanian narrative. He wrote that because of many events that took place, it was necessary to constantly add new information. Okay, I haven't time. Thank you for attention for my report.
Thank you, Oleksandr, for this very detailed overview of the literary background of Gregoras' history. And for my part, I note with satisfaction that it provides a decisive refutation of my failed attempt to contest Sergejus' reasoning, because as we could see on the slide, Gregoras accepted both the Demosthenes and Dionysius of Halicarnassus. So he could definitely find the expression cited by Sergejus. And actually, it would be very interesting to check if the passage in question appears among the excerpts that are in the Heidelberg manuscript. But I'm sure that there are other observations and questions to Oleksandr. Please. Well, then, if there are no other, Katerina? Yeah, please. Well, apparently you were put under pressure.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. And also for the very nice images of the manuscript. It was really interesting to see how a Byzantine scholar actually worked. You have the main text, you have the Excepta, but you have the commentaries by Gregoras, and it was really nice to see actually his hand on this manuscript. I was intrigued by what you said about this polyanthropon ethnos, which we have also in the register. This is the way they describe the land of the Rus as a wide land with many people. And I was astonished to see that also Gregoras has this remark. Do you think it's just something that it was commonly believed in Constantinople, perhaps, for this was the general assertion about the land of the Rus? That's why he also uses that, or it was only among the scholars? How can you explain the presence of this phrase in the patriarchal register and in Gregoras, which were actually opposite parties? Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your interesting questions. The expression polyanthropos ethnos is not popular to 14th century. I found only mention in John Thess Heliades about the multi-ethnic community on Danubius realm in dating to middle of 12th century, but this expression is growing from first year of 43, and this focus dedicated to land of Rus created on maybe personal communication with Russian principalities and diplomatic relation when a Byzantine historian obtained information about not only geography of North but number of people in Rus too. Maybe we have a strongly connection between patriarchal chart and Grigora history, because Grigora compiled many manuscripts and many historical documents, including Emperor Chrysovolos, and it's possible that he collected some patriarch chart and reread or borrowing some expression to this text.
Thank you, Oleksandr. Other questions? Other remarks? Nazar, please.
Just a short suggestion or remark concerning polyanthropos ethnos. Just a suggestion that maybe it was connected to one of the goods delivered from Rus, namely slaves. I mean, there were so many, so it must be a very polyanthropos ethnos, so they could deliver during many centuries the slaves to the Constantinople also.
Thank you.
I do not think that slaves population or slaves on the market created some idea for Nicephorus Gregoras history. Maybe, but we have strongly connection with library library of Gregoras, and Gregoras found many words from these materials and transmitted this to his history. Grigora created some list, vocabulary list about Rusland, and he know anything about early time, from time 11th century, and he compiled only material of first half of 14th century.
Thank you. If there are no more observations or questions, Darius suggests a 5-minute break for everybody to recover some forces before Monica tells us all about what we heard. Thank you.
5 minutes before doomsday breaks down on us.